My name is Monica Guddat, and I've been in the film industry since 1993. My father was a hobby photographer, and he was a jeweler, and so I used to watch him on his workbench very meticulously deal with details. So, and I saw how those details translated into his eye for photography, and he gave me his old Nikon F when he was older. And so I think a lot of my inspiration also came from him and from watching him take pictures and seeing that kind of detail and precision of his work in general. My interest in cinematography probably started in high school when I took art classes and really enjoyed those, and then went on to pursue art in post-secondary school. I went to the Ontario College of Art. I happened into a film class because I couldn't find another class to fit in my schedule, and I wasn't actually interested in film until I started shooting film. When I finished my first day of shooting of my first film ever, I couldn't sleep that night because I was so excited because I'd finally found the thing that I wanted to do. The path I took to becoming a cinematographer, first it started in art school and taking some film classes there. Then I went out west to Vancouver for a summer. A friend of mine who had graduated OCA asked me to come out and shoot some music videos with him. He was directing and editing. I went with the intention of staying for the summer and then stayed for, I think, about 4 years and ended up continuing to work on music videos and some other documentary projects. At the same time, I also realized I wanted to get in through the union route and became a trainee. So I was doing both. I was a trainee on features and I was a DP on music videos, kind of at the same time, leading two lives. When I'm shooting documentaries, what I like to do is try to really connect with the subject and make them comfortable with my presence. And then once I've established that sort of comfort and familiarity, I have this ability to make myself sort of disappear into their world where they can't notice me anymore. And I think that's a really important thing to be able to do when you're shooting docs, especially. I think an important sensibility to have as a cinematographer is to really understand the story, whatever the story is that you're trying to tell, whether it be a small story of a product or a bigger story of an epic, a more dramatic epic kind of story. It's really about finding the pieces that tell that story. So it's finding those visual fragments that will come together and tell that story in a visual way. As a DP, I'm kind of like a translator in a lot of ways. I'm translating the story into something visual. I'm translating the director's ideas into something that I have to then translate to my crew. Many levels of translation that happen between story and between the people that help create the pieces of that story. You know, you also have to be flexible because you've got to be able to sort of maneuver from, docs to commercials to narrative and be able to, not just specialize in one category, but it's great to be able to work in all different types of genres and, understand that you're still pursuing a very similar goal, whether you're selling a product or a story or a feeling. It's still, something that you have to translate into images. Some of the struggles I've faced, well, as an assistant before I became a DP, there were certainly struggles that were faced then. There weren't that many women doing what I was doing. There were some jobs that I knew I blatantly didn't get because the DP or the operator didn't want a woman on camera, on their camera team. So that's, thankfully becoming less of a struggle for assistants now. One of the biggest struggles when I became a DP, when I hung up my assisting hat, was just not seeing very many women out there DPing. So it's hard when you don't see yourself having a place in a culture, and you are kind of on your own when you're moving ahead. So it was a bit of a lonely road for a while, although I had some great support and some men that I worked with, but it was really hard not seeing very many women out there. The first job I ever did as a DP, I was working on a music video for a band called Skinny Puppy. And I came on set and I started asking for equipment from the Grips and Electric. I was actually doing second unit. And they came onto our set. I saw people sort of peeking in through the doorway, and they were looking at me like I was a unicorn and trying to ask for, lights and equipment. And they just looked at me like what are you doing here? And it was just that much of an anomaly to see a woman DP on set that, that's how they perceived me. Some advice that would have been helpful when I was, in my early career days was to consider the possibility of how work and family might come together, and how and when I wanted that to happen. You can only control so much in life, but it's good to, at least have a plan. And I kind of was just working until suddenly I realized I was in my mid-30s and I should consider kids if I was going to go there. But I, in hindsight, it would have been more helpful to think about it sooner. I don't really know any other women DPs with families. So it's something that's really, for me, a very clear, difficulty to manage the two things. And I think there's a reason there's not too many women DPs with families, because it's hard. The balance of work and life is a really tough struggle for a lot of women, especially if you're going to have kids. So in my mid-30s, I decided I should probably think about having kids if I was going to do that. I had a kid, got married, and then had another child. And that really did affect my career substantially. I'm not in the position of having a big family around to help out, so it was either I raise my kids or I hire people to raise my kids. And my husband is a traveling, touring musician, so his career schedule is as difficult to manage as mine. So I really did have to make a choice at that point of, whether to focus my energy in raising my family or hire that out and focus on my career. When I first had my daughter, I did have to take her to set sometimes, and I would hire a nanny. And then I would, go and I was nursing my baby, so I'd go and I'd have to find a place to go nurse her during breaks, and sometimes ask for a break if we were working for 6 hours and we hadn't had one yet, and that wasn't always welcome, but it was necessary. So I made the decision to take a step back from my career and focus on raising my family. I did manage to keep current and keep shooting small jobs and not completely extract myself from the industry. It was very important for me and just for my identity to stay working as much as I could. So there was just this yearning to be out there and shooting, and but I'm at home and I'm looking after my kids. So sometimes it really felt difficult to accept that. Finding the solution to the work-life balance is just another problem-solving exercise that, as a cinematographer who's got a family, I've got to figure out. I guess in my life plan, I didn't initially factor children in. So I imagined my career to have this trajectory. then in hindsight now it hasn't taken, but I have these two great children and a husband and a family that I didn't initially consider in my big picture of life. So ultimately, I'd say I'm really happy with how it's all worked out. And in terms of my career, I'm just going to keep working and pushing it back to where I want to see it go. I still have time. Some traits that help my career are just being clear about what I want and knowing what I need to do to solve the problem, because cinematography is just a lot of problem solving. And so being able to just calmly sit and look at a problem with perspective and then figure out how to slowly achieve what you're trying to get at. And also using your resources, communicating, getting help from other people, and taking advice. And everyone has an eye and an opinion, and sometimes those opinions really can make a difference. When I was an assistant, I said yes to every job because you always wanted the next job. Now that led me to working in some pretty toxic environments at times and working with some people that were challenging to work with. And I remember the first time I said no to a job because I knew it was somebody that was excruciating to work with. And it was the first time I'd said no to a job, and I found it suddenly extremely liberating. And so that's something I've kept with me ever since. And I don't like working in toxic environments anymore. Some of the highlights of my career have been really traveling, being able to see parts of the planet I would never have gotten to see without the work that took me there. Finding myself in worlds that I would never go to otherwise. Sometimes places that I'd never want to go to, but they were interesting to drop in and explore for a while. I got to fly with the snowbirds. I got to, climb mountains and go through jungles, and there were a lot of beautiful places I've gotten to see in the world, thanks to the work that I do. And I shoot for the National Ballet a lot, and I've been shooting with them since '96, and that's beautiful every time. Well, when I started shooting, we were shooting on film, so that's quite a huge change. It's rare that you get to shoot on film nowadays. Everything's now digital. So the workflow has changed and become a bit more accessible to the general public. And so you see a lot more people coming out and shooting who don't necessarily have a lot of experience. And that's great, and that's not so great at the same time. Women are not unicorns behind cameras anymore. So that's encouraging to see. And I think the technology has made things a little more accessible and easy, and hopefully that invites more women to come and join the industry. People are a lot more civilized and a lot more careful about how they act with people. So I think, those work environments have gotten healthier. You don't have that sort of, angry, raging, toxic behavior that used to, really populate sets sometimes and really bring people down. I would love to see more women in the industry, especially in the area of cinematography. Well, I ran into a former student of mine at the White's Big Freeze, and he's now directing commercials, and it was very encouraging to hear that he demands complete parity on his sets. It was such a pleasure to hear that, in a new generation of filmmakers, that's becoming a standard that people are demanding. And I think that's very important. One of the changes in the industry that would help a lot of people, especially people who want to have a better balance of work and life, would be a more regulated and diminished work day in terms of our hours. We tend to really work longer hours than most people, and that can be a difficult thing to manage in families. I would like to get back into get my teeth into some drama again. I'm also really interested in some of the newer forms of technology and where they intersect with kind of like virtual reality and film, where those intersect. I'm quite interested in exploring that convergence of worlds and technologies. I mean, in terms of people who I'd want to work with, I'm now very clear that I only want to work with people that I would enjoy working with, and that is much more important to me than it ever was. Well, if you're just getting into the craft, shoot a lot of stuff and make sure that you force yourself to edit it as well, because learning how to edit the work that you produce teaches you so much about what you're doing, because it's easy to just hand off something and make somebody else deal with it. But if you're somebody who has to deal with it, you learn so much. A really important bit of advice I guess I could give is to just be kind to everybody. We're all trying to make our lives move forward together, and you never know if the person who is working on set as a PA is going to be the producer that you're going to look for a job from next time around. So, and that happens often. While you're in film school, if that's the route that you take, that's really the foundation of your work life. And that's something I don't know if students really consider all that much, because the relationships that you form in school are often relationships that will carry you through your life if you do them well. And there are people that I've gone to school with that I still work with on a regular basis, and that was a little while ago. So, really much of this business is about building good relationships with people and being the kind of person that people want to work with. And it's nice to be part of the CSC and feel like there is a really growing and strong group of women here. I mean, I didn't join the CSC for quite a long time, until quite recently, because I was used to being the kind of a lone ranger in a lot of ways. And having joined recently, it's really nice to feel like there's a community that I'm supported by.